everyone. We'll get the meeting underway, and we'll now turn to the deputations on item 7, the approval to notify plan changes 13 and 14. I'll just quickly run through the procedure. So we'll hear the deputations first. We will then have a presentation from staff, and that will be in two parts. We'll have the process and the law to start with, and we'll have the detail of the plan changes that are proposed to be notified following that. So I will start off with inviting the deputations to come forward. The first is Riccarton Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association, Tony Simons. Kia ora and welcome.
Kia ora, Madam Mayor. Kia ora koutou, katoa. It's not at all nerve-wracking being first up. As you probably know, Riccarton Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association is one of 17 community groups and residents associations that signed a joint statement asking you all to stand up for the city against this attack by one-size-fits-all cut-and-paste intensification that is totally unsuitable for Christchurch. And the terrible irony here is that many of you, maybe even most of you, are unhappy with this. More than $2 billion worth of new housing was approved across Christchurch in the last 12 months. So this plan is totally unnecessary and it is damaging. So I'm here on behalf of our association to ask you to vote for what is right, not for what is expected or what is expedient. This plan needs more mahi. It ignores good urban design. It ignores our history, our character, and our established community amenity values. It robs us of trees and outdoor spaces. And the more tall buildings that are erected, the more sunshine and privacy we lose, and the more existing residents will flee to places like Prebbleton and Lincoln and Ahoka. You do see the irony in that, I'm sure. Permitted building heights and developer-friendly recession planes will turn Christchurch into a cold, dark, damp city, robbing us of sunlight and creating areas of almost permanent shade. Madam Mayor, we know you've called for a strategy to make Christchurch a national park city. We also know you would like to see Christchurch as the world's most livable city. If that really is the vision, this is not a great way to get that started. Instead, the developers are going to decide what future Christchurch will look like. And if you vote yes today, you have to defend this plan in front of a hearings panel. How do you reconcile that with the statements that you've made expressing reservations and in some cases downright opposition? So vote no and send it back. Intensify where it is needed. Re-examine what character and heritage mean in a wider community context, protect our trees, give us back our sunlight and our outdoor spaces, and please rethink those town centres and their boundaries and the walking catchments so they make some sense. Last week I walked from the supermarket in Westfield Mall to the edge of our proposed Riccarton walking catchment in Matai Street West. It took me 24 minutes. And I wasn't carrying bags of groceries. This morning, our association received an email from Hamilton City Council wishing us well today. Hamilton voted no to blanket housing intensification. The email says, "We understand your challenges. We had strong intent from our elected members for a better outcome than the government was proposing. Then we had an incredible team of staff who found ways to do that. We've been creative, and we've used our local resources and expert staff to deliver a very satisfying outcome." Signed by Angela O'Leary, Chair of Hamilton's Infrastructure Operations Committee, and Ryan Hamilton, who's chair of their district plan committee. Why can't we do that? Finally, I have a problem with the legal process here. If you vote today to notify medium density, it will take effect in 2 weeks. And 3-storey developments are immediately permitted in most of Riccarton, in fact, in most of Christchurch. We have given notice, and we do so here again today, that we intend to exercise our right to ask the hearing panel for qualifying matter protection. If you vote to notify medium density today, you will have prejudiced that right. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a few seconds left for a question, if somebody's got a quick question. Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. In the written submission, the first bullet point, you say every Tier 1 council appears to have taken a different track. Are you able just to elaborate on what the different track, I mean, you've touched on Hamilton, but... Yeah.
I'm aware that every Tier 1 city has its own challenges and its own issues. And that's the very reason why one size fits all is such a bad idea. So Auckland, for example, is moving to protect create character areas where all the villas are. Government's pushing back on that. Hamilton has decided that it won't impose blanket intensification across the city for its own reasons, completely different from Auckland. And Christchurch should be doing the same thing. We should be looking at our own situation and making a bespoke plan which meets what the government wants, but does so in a way that that is not damaging to our city.
Well, that brings us to the end of the 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your deputation today. Could I invite Mark Duff from the Greater Hornby residents to come forward?
I'm actually speaking today. Today is the 8th of September 2022, a significant day for our city, the councillors and the mayor that preside in the council chambers today. You've been asked to approve the intensification dictate that has come from central government. What suits other cities does not suit Christchurch, as we're our own entity, not a suburb of a North Island city. The residents have been quite clear. 94% in a survey carried out in our area replied they do not want this. 94%. You have been elected to represent your residents, not central government. Therefore, vote no in accordance to their wishes. Remember, while many people tend to have short memories, council elections are very close. Infrastructure demanded by developers will cripple the city, and rates will escalate madly if this is approved. Crime rates will escalate with cars parked on streets targeted even more heavily than is currently happening. Remember the result of the failed intensification of Aranui in the 1960s. And what happened there? Slum conditions will come in 2 to 3 decades down the track after the developers have left. Our tree canopy, which is critical, will become more depleted. The choice is simple. Vote no, keep your integrity and the respect of the residents, or vote yes and lose it. Thank you.
Are there any questions from councillors? No, Pauline.
I'll ask the hard one. Thank you for your deputation. If we notify, then we stay in the process and the City of Christchurch residents get to make a submission. If we don't notify, it goes out of our hands and then we will have no influence on it at all. You'll still be able to submit, but probably to a Crown manager. So what's your response to that?
Well, Crown managers are only so far. If there's an absolute residents' rebellion against a Crown manager, and that comes out to the government, they will have a problem. The government will have a problem.
So you
We've
still
got to
think,
remember the people are the ones that speak,
yeah,
not the government.
I think our concern too is if you do stay in, the influence you're going to have is going to be very minimal. I mean, we don't have confidence that you're going to have that much impact if you stay in. I think you can send a really loud message as a city council today and vote no. I think you need to show central government who owns this city.
and I appreciate that. And the other thing is that staff have cobbled up some qualifying matters that we do have hopefully some influence on as a result of the informal feedback that we've received to date, and they could well be lost, disappeared if the Crown manager takes over. So is that worth the risk as well?
Well, we have actually virtually been told that we can't have any feedback really on on stuff until after it's gone through. For instance, in our area, our infrastructure is totally shattered. We're the only suburb in Christchurch that's got one footpath in its shopping centre. We'd love to see every suburb have one footpath in the shopping centre, so they're equal with us.
I mean, and I don't think our suburb is going to be solved by qualifying matters as well. We've already seen some intensification already happening, and we're already seeing increased break-ins into cars on the streets, and that's only going to increase. We've seen Amy's Road, which has been undergoing repairs for 3 years now, and that's one of the streets where there's, I think, 3 vacant sections already waiting for the intensification to go through, and we're just going to have more pressure put on those roads, our sewage, everything, especially the road, Amy's Road. I mean, for 3 years now, they've already been trying to fix it.
So you think, your opinion is that you don't think our qualifying matters are going to hold much weight, and you're prepared to take the risk of a Crown manager going in there instead of us and being subjected to the public opinion?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
that's great.
because if we took a referendum on the capability of the Crown manager and it was against their wishes, I think that would have a fair sort of ramification.
I think a no vote today would give the residents a really strong feel that the council fully understands their concerns.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. We've come to
Okay,
the end.
okay. Thank you.
Victoria Neighbourhood Association, Jeff Banks and David Chambers.
I'm afraid my voice has been failing me for the last couple of days, so we're presenting as a duo
That's fine.
with drugs and whatever.
Tēnā koe kora mātua, Leanne, tēnā koutou katoa, ko David tōku ingoa, ko Jeff tōna ingoa. Everything is not all right with PC14. It will have damaging social impacts. The V&A supports a well-functioning urban environment, but PC14 risks delivering the opposite.
So, what can you do?
An independent evaluation report is needed. PC14 enables 5 million people to live in our city. We have not seen any report that mentions the effects of enabling 5 million people. Have you? It's not rhetorical. Have you? Anybody put their hand up? You guys?
Right. Your staff say you can't notify changes without an evaluation. Your staff also say it would require a substantive rewrite of the proposal provisions for notification in relation to doing such an evaluation. Therefore, you can't notify PC14 without the mahi.
Sunlight impacts economy, environment and health. PC14 threatens to rob significant sunlight daylight. Shading is 79% more here than if we live in Auckland under this legislation. You can fix housing inequity by changing the PC14.
So this is where my engineering mind kicks in. This is the current shade under the current suburban rules. This is not central city, this is the suburbs. PC14 robs 17 metres of daylight when you build an MDRS neighbouring house in Christchurch. Note where the solar panels are, please. I'm just going to flick back So that's what it is at the moment. That's what it's going to be on the 23rd if you say yes. Even worse, that's 79% more shade than in Auckland. You'll see the middle shade that just skims over the house is Auckland. The 7.5 metres or 79% more in Auckland. That is because the sun sits 7 degrees lower in Christchurch than it does in Auckland. There is no account of that taken in the Act. But you can fix it. PC 14 could fix this by a land contribution. That's not lower intensification, it's shifting the building. Even better, quality design means no land contribution.
So today, vote to get the independent evaluation report. Then you can change PC 14 to limit the damage to our city. Set building heights at the absolute minimum, shrink commercial zones, and reduce walkability distances. For example, reduce the core. What is that skinny bit up the top there? I mean, core? Blimey.
Councillors, you can right the wrong. Vote for an independent evaluation. You can't legally notify PC 14. You can't. Your staff have told you that. Let me be crystal clear. You don't have the evaluation. No one put their hand up. You cannot legally notify PC 14 today.
Everything is going to be all right, I'm sure. But this is huge. How do you, as councillors, right now, want to be remembered? Any other questions? No?
Any questions?
Any questions? No? Well, I've got one. Have we got time? I've got one more.
One more question.
Jeff, the council expects the growth of 50,000 homes in the next 30 years, but this PC 14 enables up to 5 million people. What will be the impact if the council votes yes to PC 14?
Well, firstly, it would be an awful lot of Aucklanders filling their cars with a family and putting trailers on the back, coming across Cook Strait. No, look, we and council staff have said why this would be illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but would expect to see significant efforts to deal with it straight away, if you said yes. For the people of our city, most would be at immediate risk of the effects we have described, but not know if or when it might happen. This is a very stressful position to put us all in. And look, I'd remind you that mental health problems are 40% more worse in Christchurch because of the earthquakes.
Thank you very much for your submission. The Central Riccarton Residents Association, Garth Wilson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. We ask that every councillor receive a copy of our submission because this is the most important and most far-reaching decision facing this council in the last 10 years. It's been said that council's hands are tied. This is not true. It has been said that one size fits all. That statement was rejected by this mayor and council at a meeting quite some time ago. The mayor knows the public feedback because she was at Avonhead where more than 300 people attended a meeting and excoriated Labour, Greens, National and Te Pāti Māori for pushing this through Parliament in a matter of 5 days, the same way that Putin's Russia operates, the same way that Xi's China operates. But we live in Christchurch, New Zealand, and this is not the way to behave. Now, this council can easily vote to reject the plans. The council is not a puppet of the government. It is not a puppet of any government. Statements produced by staff are often fictional. For example, their population projections. In fact, the population of Christchurch has grown by 0.01% in the last 3 years. The population of Auckland and Invercargill have both declined in the last 3 years. Kiwibank, on the 24th of August of this year, said there will be a surplus of houses in New Zealand within a year. The role of mayor and councillors is to safeguard ratepayers and residents. These proposed planning changes are a deliberate assault and attack on the health, both physical and mental, of residents, particularly those people living in single-storey dwellings. Access to light and sunlight, as well as water, are the three essentials for physical and mental health. It is one thing to construct these multi-storey buildings in brand new subdivisions. It's quite another to have them pepper-potted around existing residential areas where the overwhelming majority of houses are single-storey. The council is currently wasting our ratepayer money advertising on radio for residents to let council know what sort of a city they want to live in. Surely the 700 plus submissions that have been made to you on this matter alone make clear the sort of city Christchurch residents want to live in. The Prime Minister herself is very fond of saying, "I reject the premise of your question." This council should tell the Prime Minister, "We reject the premise of your plan changes." Is this council a puppet of the government? Is this building in Hereford Street a campus of the Beehive? The decision you make today will define your mayoralty, Madam Mayor, and it will define this council. Our association message is quite clear to you all. Reject these plans, then let the government dare to return serve.
Thank you. Time for a quick question. Sarah?
Kia ora, thanks for that. I'm interested in the figures that you've got saying that the growth doesn't warrant the additional intensification. Yeah. And I'm wondering if those figures are correct, then even if we put this through, developers wouldn't be building the homes because there'd be no market for them. Is that right?
Well, developers are building as madly as they can do it, and they're being facilitated by the Resorts Consents Department of this council, who are already allowing developments to proceed that do not comply with the existing district plan. And we are going to be asking the next mayor and council to instigate a judicial inquiry into the conduct of the Resource Consents Department, because we have the evidence that district plan's not being complied with.
1 minute. We've got a relatively sort of benign set of standing orders that just sit over the way that we address certain issues in relation to stuff. So if we could just stick to the matter that's in front of us.
The developers are building these because they are making so much money. They are destroying the communities they're building in. We invite you to come to Central Riccarton and have a look. There are people around this council table that have been and seen for themselves what is happening.
And on that note, can I thank you for making your group available to take me on that walk and open my eyes very early on in my mayoralty to the challenges that is faced by communities such as your own with intensified developments, but also at that stage of things, single bedrooms being sold, rented on an individual basis, so 4 cars per unit, as compared to one villa on a site. So you showed it to me, and I was able to see it for my own eyes. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. St Albans Residents Association. I think we have Mark Wilson representing them today. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So apologies for Jason, he wasn't able to make it today, so I'm on short notice. And thank you very much for everyone who's turned up and just the effort and energy into putting these submissions, and well researched as well, obviously. So I'm here as a St Albans Residents Association committee member, and I've got the St Albans News here. The Stan goes out to 7,300 households. Hopefully, about 14,000 people read it in our community. Front page. Residents Association takes collective action over housing. Everything I say today is going to be in this or along those lines, so it's well notified within our community. So Sarah supports the request of the Joint Residents Association statement calling for Council to vote no today to the proposed plan change. St Albans and the surrounding suburbs have been concerned for some time at the intensification already happening in our areas. This is supposedly controlled intensification under the current city plans, and this has led to lots of community concerns about lack of notifications of works, loss of privacy, shading, loss of character, and loss of trees. We can only imagine the devastation uncontrolled intensification will look like for our communities under the MDRS. However, please understand, we support the need and urgency for residential intensification, but this needs to be part of a much wider urban plan, which is simply not what the MDRS is. We held a public meeting at our community centre maybe about a month ago, which was very well attended. Members of our community spoke at this meeting, as well as council urban planners. And we'd like to thank those staff that did actually come to our meeting, that no doubt also performed this task in other communities. And we understand that it's a pretty thankless task, really, of selling this forced plan to well-informed, caring residents. So thank you to the staff that actually, turned up. What Sarah took away from our community meeting was the level of opposition to these forced plans and the lack of protection that is currently afforded to our trees when development is taking place. You currently employ urban planners. They will be reduced to administration staff, and residents in Christchurch will have no effective rights or control over how their community grows and the levels of amenity it affords the people who live within it. It's time to be brave and say no thanks, but let's talk about a comprehensive urban plan. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time for a question. Well, perhaps if I ask the same question that was asked of others. You know that, that under the RMA, if we don't notify, the government can, in fact, put in place somebody who can notify. And so that it could be just their role is to notify the plan change. They don't have to accept the advice that's been received. So there's qualifying matters that we're going to be considering today. But you'd rather that it went out with no qualifying matters or with reduced qualifying matters than us put one out with qualifying matters.
Yep.
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 Cool.
That's
a
exactly what
straight
we'd like you to
answer.
do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, I'm just worried because I think wait one.
Sure.
I've got Greg Partridge has a time problem. So
Oh no, I'm fine. Work can wait. This is far more important.
Oh, you are Greg.
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Sorry, maybe you don't recognise me behind the mask.
I actually literally, Greg,
Hello,
I wasn't going to
yes.
call you
I'm
next.
not going to
but
sing behind the
The
mask.
thing was that you weren't on my list to call next, but I
Oh.
was going to call you so you could
Okay.
be called in time.
Thank you.
for
I
your
recognise the
departure
slide,
time.
which is my work.
Okay. Please.
Righto,
welcome.
I hate sitting here because I end up with a dry mouth, and I'd much rather be at work than in front of council doing this. I don't like speaking publicly, but as you know, I'm passionate about this. So I'll get going once I get my glasses on. Poor planning leads to poor outcomes, and the housing amendment law change will be no exception to that. At best, it can be described as a rushed, ill-considered, quick-fix solution to the so-called housing crisis, and one that hasn't been well thought through in the midst of a climate emergency. It should therefore be rejected and challenged by the City Council, particularly if the City want to avoid the detrimental, unintended consequences that will be inflicted on the mental health and well-being of people who live here, along with the destructive impact on our environment. Kiwibank's chief economist has said that the housing crisis will abate within the next 12 months, that house prices will fall 13% by year end, and that they will be back to where they were at the start of 2021, that population growth in New Zealand is at its lowest since the 1980s. Tony Alexander, an independent economist, agrees, and Stats New Zealand has said that year ending June 2022, 41,000 houses were built, and that we're actually going to find ourselves with a surplus. So why proceed with embedding a haphazard and destructive law change into our district plan that is not fit for purpose? Mayor Dalzell, you've been on the radio and said we don't have a choice, but the City Council does. You have a choice to ensure that Christchurch remains a green, livable garden city, a city that through structured planning is one that we're proud to live in. Your alternative is to bow to central government and allow Christchurch to be rendered a grey, leafless concrete jungle, in much the way that the council has enabled to happen in suburbs like Phillipstown. The draft plan changes. Developers have proven that they are focused on profit, not the environment, that they have deep, deep pockets, and the more units they can squeeze onto a site, the more money they can make. We're in the midst of a climate change emergency. We need rules in place that will actually eliminate the clear felling of trees to protect our environment. Vienna did that 50 years or nearly 50 years ago. They are now the world's most livable city. That's what we should be aiming to do. I'm not going to even talk about this slide because the irony of it is ridiculous. The City Council has the opportunity to actually pursue a judicial review and must do so, and it must be undertaken to investigate the transparency and the legality of the process in which this law change was forced through Parliament, with a particular focus on the insufficient time frame provided for a full community engagement on such a significant piece of legislation. When a bill is put to Parliament, it normally goes to a select committee, and they're normally provided with a 6-month period of time in which to gather information, prepare a report back to Parliament for it to be voted on, and the report includes recommendations of any changes that may be needed. 5 days was all that was given to this bill, not 6 months. There is your grounds for a judicial review. It was forced through Parliament. We weren't given a say. You weren't given enough of a say to actually consult with us. There is a smarter plan, and I've got a petition going out, and it's gathered more than 1,600 people's signatures to it, that is actually about filling the central city, the wasteland that's been left after the earthquake, with high-rise apartment buildings with green space in between them. But you can look at that offline. My question to the council is, how do you guys want to be remembered? There is an election coming up. Others have referred to it. Do you want to be remembered as leaders in the city that actually fought for the people that voted you in? Or do you want to be seen as being weak and lacking courage to actually fight back against central government? Vladimir Zelensky fought back against the dictatorship next door to him. You guys should be doing the same here in New Zealand.
got a little bit of time for Greg. Melanie.
What do you think of the proposal and the notification for requiring developers to have 20% canopy cover on sites or otherwise charging them?
As I said, they have very deep pockets and they will just pay out the money because they know that they will get more profit out of selling a unit than what the council is actually going to charge them to chop a tree down. And if you think that they won't, you're fooling yourselves. They're doing it now all the time. Just look at what the cities... We've only got 13.5% tree canopy coverage as it is. It takes 20 years for a canopy to actually be established. They're cutting trees down left, right and centre, and they're doing it everywhere across Christchurch that they can. And you guys declared a climate emergency 3.5 years ago, and no trees have been added to the list of protected trees in our city. We need trees amongst our homes, not in isolated pockets, not in parks, not in the red zone, amongst our homes, in our residential communities. You have on your own council webpage and on other council web pages throughout New Zealand all the listed benefits of trees. I'm not a scientist, I'm not David Attenborough, but there are scientists out there on which you have based that information in the public forum.
Look, thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
So I've got Summerfield Residents Association. Julie. Welcome.
Right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. One plan should not fit all. Christchurch is not Auckland, and Summerfield should not be Gleneden. On behalf of our Summerfield Residents Association and 16 other resident associations who have spoke very well, thank you today, I request for you as our Mayor and council staff to advocate for the future of our communities and our city. I request that if you do decide, well, I actually want you to vote no, because I think that will make you stand out as a council, but however, qualifying matters would be a second best scenario, and there needs to be more of them. So while Christchurch, I acknowledge, needs diverse housing options, we do not need the extent of high level of intensification, which has been imposed upon us by the government, like all the rest of the cities of New Zealand. I would request for central city land to be utilised first, to make our CBD a post-earthquake vibrant city as planned, and to not dramatically change our residential family suburbs forever. You will have heard or be hearing of the many concerns that 3 to 6 storey housing will impact on our city, such as loss of sun, loss of privacy, impacts on bird life, trees, climate change, loss of heritage homes and car parking, further reduction of school zones, increase in crime in smaller areas of living. Need I go on? Mental health as well. Being a nurse, I think that will have a huge implication. The effects of future earthquakes. Don't let us forget how Christchurch has endured and changed after thousands of earthquakes, while the Alpine fault is still waiting to wreak havoc. So impact also on more flood events. Due to climate change, the unique geography of Christchurch and the history of swampland liquefaction, there will be worse flood events. We need to mitigate these effects and not exacerbate worst case scenarios. I concur with all who are dressed in black here today. Great to see with the signs, and for anyone with concerns. But however, my biggest concern is whether the infrastructure of our city may cope with the additional housing intensifications. And will the power, sewer systems and toilets in our homes finally malfunction completely and make our homes existing be undesirable and unlivable in the future? As a Summerfield chairperson and resident in Leach Street for the past 29 years, I am already surrounded by 2 and 3 storey developments. So I understand firsthand the implications of this and what it's like to live next door to them, let alone 3 to 6 stories high. Already Leach Street is known to the council as a flood-prone street. With the adjourning wilderness drain and growth of such developments, it will become even more vulnerable in future events. A request for streets like this to be a qualifying matter, unless the infrastructure for drainage and sewer can be suitably upgraded. So Summerfield and many other areas have original character properties and inadequate infrastructure not properly designed for 4 to 6 story high density complexes. And the gutters roads were actually originally created for horses and carts. If residents' toilet systems don't cope now or in the future, or if they overflow, who will be ultimately responsible for the sewer overflowing, and could this make our homes not so livable? What do we do then? Christchurch should not be compared with other cities which have not endured the same natural disaster events. Christchurch is currently functioning well. Housing can be increased, but it is the level of how it is done which will make or break our city long term. For example, what is happening in Rotorua currently? Is that going to happen in Christchurch? We can stop that. You can stop that as our council. I mainly request for the current and future mayor and council staff to allow for respectfully and reasonably designed housing only. Utilise central city land prior to suburbs, upgrade infrastructure for original streets being developed, and work with our resident association groups and communities, not against us. So we are having a meeting for housing intensification on the 20th of September. We welcome any of you to come forward and to talk to us about that. I think it's important our communities are aware. We also, Summerfield finally got into the news. We were in the press paper as a sweet spot. Is that going to last? Our area has already been peppered with all these developments now. Will we be a sweet spot in a few years? Who knows? Any questions?
No, look, thank you very much,
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for making the time and the effort to come and present today. It's been very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I've got the one of the community boards next. Sorry, I'm just. Sorry, I've got it's Waipuna, Hallsville, Hornby, Riccarton Community Board. Debbie Mora, thank you.
Right, as some people have said, it's not often I'm here before you, so it must be pretty important for me to be here. This has certainly been a hot topic lately and a concern of many that their voices will not be given an opportunity for public consultation, especially for medium density. And there appears to be some confusion surrounding that, even as a board member getting mixed messages. I am before you today speaking as chairman of our Hallsville, Hornby, Riccarton Community Board's Submission Committee, speaking to our feedback to you earlier this year on the 12th of May, which is found in your hub, and it's the first document there before you, if you felt to bring it up for the public's reference. So I cannot really deviate too far from our report, but it does sound like it's quite in conjunction with what's been read out to you earlier. Christchurch has been my home my entire life. That's a real long time. We live in what is infamously known as the Garden City, not a concrete jungle. And our feedback via public consultation process from all is imperative right from the start to get this right the first time. Christchurch is just one of 5 cities under this new intensification plan. 1.4 of our feedback reads, many residents have expressed the view that the proposed changes remove the ability for residents to have a say in planning the city they would like to live in, and by not having the appropriate say will serve to destroy the unique character of Christchurch. 1.3, just above that, which I feel could be the solution that we're all looking for. Our board queries whether the major earthquake sequence suffered by Christchurch in 2010-2011 should be regarded as a qualifying matter in its whole entirety. Residents of Christchurch are understandably concerned about increased height of buildings proposed by the intensification, not only because of the actual earthquake risks of taller buildings, but also the psychological effects of these buildings on residents who have been severely traumatised by the earthquake experience. Our board believes strongly that this should be accepted as a qualifying matter, and that Christchurch should not be subject to the proposed intensification requirements. Our board stresses that if this is accepted as a qualifying matter, it does not see this as preventing intensification in the city, but rather is changing the focus from intensifying by building in parts of the city where it's more appropriate, and that's quite often has been referred to as a central city. Having the whole of Christchurch meeting the qualifying matter, as I've just mentioned, doesn't stop the intensification. It would simply control where it goes. So, if you're going to vote yes, can we include that 1.3 as an amendment to have Christchurch deemed a whole qualifying matter for the entire Christchurch, instead of having to deal with many qualifying matters, many qualifying matter applications, which would be easier to control in what many see as a very vulnerable city at the moment. Public consultation should be allowed for both medium density and high density from the get-go, and that doesn't appear to be the case in regards to medium density, with the mixed messages I was talking about before. Commercial entities, as was referred to in the prior submission, deputation, regarding drainage, plumbing, etc. Commercial entities, residents, utility providers, all should be allowed to make a submission on both medium and high density plan change and the effects thereof, how they see it affect our garden city. We ask that the council vote for public consultation to go ahead in its entirety for both medium and high density intensification, and that the amendment is to include that 1.3, that the whole city is deemed as a qualifying matter due to our vulnerability. And also, as just was expressed earlier, our sunlight loss is greater. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Thanks very much. Next is Momentous Public Relations, David Lunch. And Barbara Stewart.
Of water. And speaking of which, congratulations to the council on the very successful outcome in protecting our water and challenging ECAN. Madam Mayor, if I may, before you turn the clock on, I would just like to make a small acknowledgement that I think a lot of people in this room may wish to support, and that is in a month or so's time, you will leave this place.
David, that's very kind of you, but
Okay.
can you please
We wish you well in your endeavours.
We're going to switch the clock on. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. It is what it is. I'm here today in my capacity as Director of Momentous Public Relations, and joining me is Barbara Stewart, with an apology from Helen Broughton. We have previously made written and oral submissions to this council last year and to the Parliamentary Select Committee in respect of the housing intensification legislation. So why are we here? We support the 17 residents groups' concerns regarding the government's fast-tracking medium-density housing plan changes and endorse their call for well-planned, balanced residential intensification where it is needed, such as in the central city, and only after communities have been consulted. Today, those dressed in black represent the death of our democracy if you do not stand up for it. There can be no question that there is a need for the intensification. No one is questioning that. And as our Mayor has previously stated, one size does not fit all. The adverse effects for Christchurch of this centrally imposed and fast-track legislation, in our view, will be far-reaching and long-term. Whilst these effects will be many and varied, what ultimately must be of prime concern to you as our elected representatives and those standing for re-election will be the consequences in terms of health, well-being, and in particular, mental health of our Christchurch residents, which continues to be very fragile after the earthquake and other events. The loss of sunlight and privacy resulting from non-notified neighbouring developments cannot be said to reflect the principles of good town planning. Neighbours will have no say before their sun and or privacy is unexpectedly removed, despite their having factored in the sun and privacy and based their decision to buy their home relying in part on the planning rules that enshrined community participation in the resource consent process. The overwhelming groundswell here today cannot be overemphasised. 17 residents groups and more. It has its origins in what we would argue is a deficient and undemocratic parliamentary process in respect of the housing intensification legislation. And so what were those issues? When the Enabling Housing Supply and Other Matters Bill was introduced, the documents and the explanatory note set out significant issues. I won't go through that now. Furthermore, as others have said, 15 working days for public submissions is an absolute insult by this government. Our letter, which was sent on the 8th of December, set out the issues that were raised to you, Madam Mayor, and all councillors. The letter requested the following: that you obtain an independent legal advice around pursuing a judicial review in respect to this matter. That did not happen. You took some internal view, which we would argue was deficient because the writer did not understand the very concerns we set out, which is disappointing. And furthermore, we understand councillors as a whole were not formally engaged in that process before the letter of response from you, Madam Mayor, was sent to Barbara Stewart and Helen Broughton. So in summary, the concerns expressed relate to the following, and these are very important. The introduction of the bill under urgency and without adequate scrutiny was a breach in my professional capacity to consult. The method and level of public stakeholder consultation was inadequate and did not reflect the significance or the magnitude of the bill and what it meant. Adequate timeframes were not provided for people to be fully informed, just as you all have a duty to be fully informed. How do you expect people 15 days before Christmas to front up and actually try and get their head around this? And the development of the bill did not allow for a full range of risks and compliance issues to be properly evaluated by members of Parliament, councils, property owners, interested parties and the people sitting here today and the people behind me. So in that letter, the Council Legal Services advice, we do not believe understood the issues that we raised, and we are here today to say to you councillors, you need to in fact review that and look at getting that independent advice, in our opinion, in respect of whether or not there is a basis for judicial review. The writer of the legal opinion compared the request to three waters. So in conclusion, the grounds for the judicial review that we maintain is essential and you should support. The rule of law recognises that people are entitled to peaceful enjoyment of their property, and the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act provides the right for peaceful ownership, enjoyment of private property, and is a foundational value of our legal tradition. You should be asking the Prime Minister, why does she want to circumvent that? What right does she have to circumvent that? So in conclusion, finally, we ask you to consider, was this period of 15 working days fair and reasonable for those potentially affected by far-reaching and long-term effects of the proposed housing intensification legislation in order to make submissions to Parliament that were meaningful? Mayor and councillors, do not allow yourselves to be intimidated by threats from government intervention. Let me tell you, as a professional working in Wellington, this government will not have an appetite to come in here with a big stick if you stand up and say no. Be heartened and take courage from the voices of the people here today, and those people that should be here that have yet to understand the dynamics and issues around this, and stand with the residents. This is a watershed moment for Christchurch. For those of you seeking to come back to this council and serve the city, think very carefully about the consequences of your vote, because I suspect many residents will be looking for you to support the 17 residents who understand why this is so horribly wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. And all the best, wherever you're going.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, the next submission is Lucy Orborn.
Good afternoon. Just before I start, I'd just like to pick up on a point that Michael raised and that Jeff from V&A raised as well. You're worried about the government coming down with a big stick, but the V&A pointed out that under the RMA, you cannot notify PC14. Can the government override the RMA and do the same? Because if you can't notify PC14, they can, so the government can override the RMA. Sorry, you were nodding.
We're going to deal with the legal issues when we get to the presentation.
It's a question, because I don't understand how the government can override the RMA as well. But anyway. Cool. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to speak at this meeting. My name's Lucy, and I'm here as a representative of your future residents at Ototati Christchurch. And I say this because I recently moved down here from Auckland. I left Auckland for two reasons: the incredibly poor city planning and the damage that it was doing to my mental health. I've lived in a city fringe suburb in Auckland for about 16 years. The last 3 years of that, I was under constant threat of the quality of my life being undermined because I lived in fear of what my neighbours were going to do. You see, Auckland City Council had already decided to start intensifying some areas of Auckland by building up. We looked to move house, but wherever we looked to move, a 6-storey building could be put up right next door. We felt cornered and trapped. I lived with this incessant gnawing in my head that my sanctuary, my home, the place that you go to restore, rest and relax, was about to be taken over by my neighbours who could see into my windows, block my sun, and take away the small amount of privacy that I actually had. My husband could see how stressed I was, and that stressed him. People who I knew were also stressed and unintentionally angry with one another. There's no community spirit, there was no tolerance, there was no idle chat or banter with the people in the shops. No one said hello to strangers. I thought this was normal because I'd become an Aucklander. But I was over it, and I wanted out, so we agreed to move. But where to go? My husband suggested Christchurch. Point blank, I said, no way. But then I thought that wasn't fair, so I decided to take a closer look. I read the Christchurch City Recovery Plan and the vision for what the people and the council had for Christchurch, and I liked what I saw. A low-rise city, doubling down on being the garden city, enhancing the river, consolidating the city centre, mixed zoning, developing a vibrant arts precinct. I thought, this is a council that knows what they're doing. They actually had a vision and a plan and an opportunity to build a fabulous city, one that we were attracted to. We trialled living here for 3 months, in the middle of winter, I've got to say, and we loved it. So we bought a home here, and we moved our lives down here, away from the mess that is Auckland. We'd just settled in. We were congratulating ourselves on our wise decision. We were bragging to our Auckland friends that they didn't know what they were missing or out on. We were happy and we were excited. And then came PC 14. I struggle to find the words to express how I felt when I read that report and what the Christchurch City Council were proposing to do under PC 14. Betrayed, disillusioned, cheated, angry, broken, stressed. My husband is again concerned about my mental health because once again we find ourselves living in fear. It's hard to keep going when your choices are being taken away from you. How could this council, the one that we had put our faith in, to do the absolute opposite of what they had promised us? Oh, it's the government. Your staff say nothing that we can do about it. But councillors, you do have a choice, and you have a choice to say no. You have a duty to protect this place and the people who live in it. If you go ahead with PC 14 as it stands today, you will ruin the city forever, and it won't have any attraction over Auckland to draw people to it. In fact, it'll have a whole lot less. Less sun, well, we know that for sure. Less people, less new residents, less visitors, less garden city. There will be no point of difference and nothing to offer. So please, I ask you, councillors, you are the governing body that represents the people that live here today and the people that might want to come in the future, to be bold. Stay the course of the vision that you had for the city. If you fall victim to embracing this poorly thought through act, then you will create a mess much, much bigger than the leaky building disaster, and a mess that cannot be undone. Please don't make a mess of this beautiful city. It has too much potential to lose. Thank you.
To Peter Wakeman.
Kia everybody. You have to look at this legislation and why it was passed. And my simple answer, it's failed relationships. It's failed relationships with our elected members of Parliament. One parliamentarian told me that he couldn't help me at all with issues I had, and he said, the Official Information Act, that's all you've got. We've been abandoned by our members of Parliament and our political parties, and we don't have a constitution to challenge our rights anymore. But when you look at Christchurch, we have 2,000 people on the emergency waiting list for housing. We have forgotten so many people who can't afford housing. And my suggestion has been that we need to build places which don't seem to be on charities' radar at the moment that have cooking or mainly meals provided with security activities rather than putting people in motels. The government's putting people in motels and they're not suitable. And people who've got drug problems can be turfed out of motels for chundering and all the other mental health issues they may have, and they can go homeless on the streets. Yet the government is spending over $2 billion buying 4 aircraft to patrol our waters. And as a pilot, I remember being rung up, on Sunday to fly out to New Brighton and photograph a ship. Could I bring the camera as well? But the thing is, the government is abandoning its people. And there's an election next year, and we need to send a clear message. And we've got to improve our relationships, the relationships with health and well-being and finance. And the whole idea is the government spent all this billions of dollars on COVID, and they haven't spent anything to reduce the cost of councils, reduce the cost of homes or housing. And this is, in my view, absolutely ridiculous response. The response needs to be like the first Labor government is funding state houses. They did that, they achieved that, and they have forgotten the finance. Unless you can actually build things that make a profit or a charity is interested in, and to build a rapid response to the demand for housing for people who are poor isn't happening. And our rates are going to be more than perhaps it will cost to rent a place, the way we're projecting it as councils around the country because of the costs that we're facing. So we need housing for the low end, and this does not address housing from the low end. And regardless of how you vote, I'd like one vote unanimous from the council to say that you do not support central government taking local councils' power away. And with the other vote, I don't want commissioners coming and taking over the council as they did in Tauranga. And I think you have to follow that the government is sovereign as far as making laws, and your own votes personally, regardless of the advice that you get, you are elected to make a decision, and that's what we expect as an elected representative representing us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfectly timed, Peter. Thank you. And last is beaming in, Helen Broughton.
And with the other...
Oh, I think she's still listening to you, Peter. Hello, Helen. There she is. Just getting technical support.
I'm always surprised.
Right, we're ready to go, Helen.
Thank you very much. This legislation, or what you're approving today, on the grounds of central government legislation, is bigger, in my view, than Three Waters. What is different is that a lot of the public... Sorry.
Oh, have you got another? Have you got the council live stream on? Because you need to turn that off.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's the problem. So we go out of live stream. Sorry. Thank you, Leanne.
That's all right. I'm a technical whiz, surprisingly.
Okay, I'm just heading out of the live stream. I'll have to be an email. Sorry, I clear it. Just a minute. I clear it. Sorry. Is there someone else who have you got another?
No, you are actually our last one.
Yes, I have. I'm trying to. Should we go out completely?
Yep. Maybe turn the volume down, someone suggests. Perhaps that will do.
Yes, that's the problem. We just get out of it completely. Sorry, Leanne,
No, it's probably sounding better.
I'll get out completely and come back in.
No, it's okay.
No.
Carry on. Just give it a go.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes, I was starting off by saying this legislation. Maybe turn the volume down.
Oh. Sorry. No, it's
It's too loud, is it? Sorry.
Look, I'm just going to adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes and let you get things in order. I'll get the team to help you through it. Cheers. sorted.
I hope.
We hope. All right, Helen Broughton, over to you.
Thank you, Leanne. This legislation and what you're putting through today based on the legislation, in my view, is worse than Three Waters. The difference is that a lot of the public aren't aware of what is about to happen. In my view, it's the most draconian piece of planning legislation I have seen in the long time I've been connected to the Christchurch City Council. It's not required for Christchurch because the council argued that we had enough land for housing until 2050. I've checked that out recently with planners to check that that thinking is still the same, and it is. You argued strongly against being included, but government ignored our request, and we've been included as a Tier 1 city, which is why we're here today. My view is, at the time that second piece of legislation passed, I believe that the 5 Tier 1 councils should have stood together and faced government down and said, no, this is not acceptable. And I did write to all 5 councils at the time. It was just prior to, in fact, Christmas. So the difficult situation here today for council, and I'm asking you, like many other submitters, to be strong and vote against this pending plan change, or the other option at the very least, go back and look further at it in view of comments which the public have made. I find our process of concern, and I'm not totally sure if you had to go down an informal path. The preferable path, if you could do this, would have been to have formal submissions, a hearings panel constituted, including councillors, and people would formally submit, all would be in public, and then a decision made. So I just want to quickly touch on the issues of Riccarton. As you're aware, I'm the current board member for Riccarton, and 3 of the 4 residents groups are highly concerned about this, and I think the 4th one would be too, but they probably haven't been involved in it to date. The first group is Central Riccarton Residents Association. As you're aware, Leanne, this hasn't been a success. It's owned medium density, hasn't been a success, and yet it's going now to 6 stories potentially to high density. The second group is the Deans Avenue Precinct Society. That's the area that covers the railway to Deans Avenue. I think council, or I believe that council has put this incorrectly into the scheme for high density. They're more than 6 minutes away from a shopping centre, a large commercial centre, and should not have been included. I did phone the council staff and ask why they'd been included, because they didn't seem to fit the actual criteria, and I was told they were included to ensure consistency. So the word was consistency. And this is one area I think that you could take out immediately because it doesn't fit the government's criteria. The third area is the area where I live, is the Riccarton Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association, and Tony Simmons has been in front of you today. Part of this area is suburban density, that's 2 stories, and it's going to 6 stories. I find that too much, and it's offensive to the people who have bought and have homes in this area. The second point is it's a heritage precinct. There's Riccarton House and Bush, Christchurch Boys High School, the old stables for Christchurch Boys High School, and Old Bridge, and you've got in Matai Street at the end of that, you've got Mona Vale, and there is an intention to make the stables a heritage item. So I believe that heritage precincts should be allowed, and Hamilton is doing this. We don't fit the heritage criteria here because we have a mixture of old and new buildings, but we have heritage features of high significance. So if Hamilton can put in heritage precincts, we should be able to do as well. The other issue I believe that we would fit in as a qualifying matter, having heritage precincts, or the other issue is that our society, or the society I'm within, applied to the hearings panel of 2015 and argued to keep current density levels, and the hearings panel agreed. So I think you could argue that a qualifying matter should be that any area that secured suburban status during the hearings panel process should actually be a qualifying matter. And there were two areas. One was our area and the other was an area in Hapanui.
Helen, can you just sort of come to a wind up? Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll just grab it. The last point I'll make on Riccarton, that we do have a council cycleway on Matai Street, and it's a council cycleway that's been there for 10 years, highly successful. Why would you want it shaded by 6-story buildings on both sides? It doesn't make sense. It's a cycleway that's used by Christchurch Girls High and Boys High and other people. And probably the last point I make is that real people are being affected by these changes driven by Wellington. I have no idea why our local MPs are supporting this, and it just goes against everything that this city stands for. And I think we forget that people are affected. People have lived in the area for 40 years. I've been to 3 public meetings on this. At 2 public meetings they were angry. The third one they were really sad. And it's probably people who feel that they would stay in this area and it's now faced with 6 stories. So I urge you to, at the very least, not approve this today and send it for further consideration by council staff. I do believe the public have spoken amazingly today. I'm not quite as coherent as they have been, but I think they've been amazingly strong. And I do think the council needs to be aware of the strength of feeling and to actually listen to the public and vote accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen. All right. So now we come to the paper itself, and if I could invite the team to come to the table